Chapter 1. Travis Burnett glanced around the boardroom table at those gathered. It wasn't a fancy boardroom, but rather one filled with pictures of family members who had fought and struggled on the Burnett Ranch, making it a success. For over a century, they had worked cattle and made this outfit one of the most profitable and most lucrative in all of Texas. Now, 12 members, all related to Eugenia and Thomas Burnett, who started the Burnett Ranch over 100 years ago, sat around the table to make decisions about their commercial ranch. A dozen members who he often felt like throttling when they came before the board with their cockamamie ideas, who he knew many would disagree with his latest idea. And still, he had to try. They had more than enough money. Why not focus on the cattle and horses? Especially now that they were talking about reality television shows coming to the Dude Ranch. Not a good idea. Why in the world would we want to let a ghost hunting show come to the ranch? He asked, wondering what they were thinking. Or smoking, for that matter. We don't need that kind of notoriety. Most of the board members were in their 20s, all family with only 2 of the previous generations still making decisions about their corporation. It could draw even more attention and make us even more popular, his cousin Joshua said. The fool must not have been visited by their great-great-great-great-grandmother. All they needed was for the television show to see her, and, oh yes, they would most definitely be the most popular dude ranch in the U.S. For all the wrong reasons. Have you been visited by the ghost? Travis asked. Was he the only one of this generation who had seen her? You don't believe that nonsense, do you? Joshua said, his smile wide. Come on, ghosts are not real, and if they are, we should make money on them. Yeah, they need to earn their keep, his cousin Cody said, laughing. We can make a lot of money on this show, and think of the free advertising. Think of all the looky-loos we'd get. Spend the night at the ranch and see a ghost, he said. She's not real, Justin said. Eugenia Burnett Jones lives on because of her matchmaking reputation. How do you think your ancestors found love? Aunt Rose asked. Oh, please, Jacob said. If she was the matchmaker, why aren't you married? Oh, dear. That was not the way to get along with their aunt. The woman could be vindictive if she felt you weren't supporting the family business the way she thought you should. We'll talk after this is over. I thought you would have known my story, but I'll be sure to enlighten you, she said, her face red. That kid had a lot to learn if he wanted to stay on the board and be in Aunt Rose's good graces. But what could he say that wouldn't make him look like a fool? And yet, they needed to know. Maybe if he admitted to seeing her, others would as well. I've seen her, he said, not wanting to admit to it, but knowing that some apparition had visited him and told him it was past time for him to remarry. I'll give her your name the next time she comes to visit. The damn ghost bothered him about once a week, telling him about the latest guest that she thought would be a good match for him. And so far, he'd avoided all of them. His cousin Joshua leaned back in his chair and laughed. I didn't think you visited the bars. Did you hold a seance like our ancestor used to do? I only drink at home, he said, and no seances were held. Just wait. She'll come visit you. Then let's talk. The man shook his head, but everyone else at the table remained silent. They either had seen the ghost or they weren't saying. She'd been here for generations, and even his father had confessed to seeing her. We don't need that kind of publicity, his Aunt Rose said. That could hurt our business. The woman had never married, but rather made the ranch her permanent home and lived in the big house. Someday she would give it up, and Travis was next in line to live there. But while the house had been remodeled, added on to, and made into a modern mansion, he would never move into the old homestead. A family needed to live in the house that had existed for over 100 years. Since he never planned on marrying again, he would probably give it to his brother Tanner. Time to move on. I make a motion that we allow the ghost hunting television show to be allowed to film on the ranch, his cousin Jacob said, glancing at his brother Joshua with a grin. All in favor, vote, Rose said. She was the head of the family and the corporation. Nothing got by this woman. Only 4 of the 12 voted to allow them to film on the ranch. Travis smiled and decided it was time for him to make his desires known. It was time they realized what a pain in the ass the Dude Ranch had become. He was tired of drunken guests, crying children, people ignoring the rules, and women who only came to go shopping in Dallas. People could be a real pain in the ass, and so many that were sitting around this board didn't have to deal with them. Motion failed, Rose said, the oldest of the family there and the head of the directors. The next item on the agenda is from Travis. She gazed at him like he was the biggest pain in the ass of the group, but he knew that wasn't true. That was his cousin Cameron. That boy had tried the patience of all of them with his privileged behavior. Travis had taken his Corvette keys away twice and told him if it happened a third time, he'd take the car. No one was allowed to drive drunk, and Cameron did enjoy his beer. All of their eyes were on him, wondering what he wanted this time. And they were going to be shocked. "I'd like to make a motion that we close the Dude Ranch part of the business," he said. They all stared at him like he was crazy. Several of his cousins leaned back in their chairs and laughed. Of course, they were the ones who didn't work with the people. They were the ones who didn't have to put up with some of the stunts their guests had pulled. "Why?" Rose, who was nearing 70, asked. "We make good money from the Dude Ranch." "Because I'm tired of dealing with all the crazies who come here thinking they can be vacation cowboys. Someone's going to get seriously hurt, and then we'll be sued." "We have insurance to handle that," Aunt Rose said. Justin shook his head. Travis's father, Mark Burnett, had taken the ranch into the modern day and upgraded their operations. But still, that didn't mean they needed the Dude Ranch. They were all extremely rich from the family business. Almost every Burnett had over $1 billion in the bank thanks to their hard-working ancestors, great cattle, and even a little oil money. His cousin Caleb shook his head. The boy had graduated college with a marketing degree, and his focus was on getting them as much publicity as possible with a fancy website, newsletters, and Instagram and Facebook profiles. Not to mention the money he had spent on advertising. "I'm with Rose. Our profit margin is over 50%. People come here and enjoy riding horses, swimming, and our cookouts. We're in almost every travel magazine in the state of Texas, and I'm attending a travel show next week in Washington, D.C. that'll showcase us even more." Damn, this was not going well. "Caleb, I'm glad you made the Dude Ranch a big success, but I'm the one who has to deal with entertaining our guests and making certain that our clients don't do something stupid like try to tame a bull. That happened last year." A smile crossed his cousin's face. "And you do a fine job of it, but we spent over $20,000 to get into those travel magazines. That would be a complete waste of money. I don't like to squander money." Shit, this wasn't going well at all. "Maybe, Travis, you should let the workers we hire do the trail rides and even the rodeo we host," Cody Burnett, Caleb's brother, said. Now that was just pure craziness. Neither one of them had ever worked the guest angle of the Dude Ranch. "You would entrust our guests' safety to hired hands? Are you willing to risk us being sued?" His brother, Tucker, who had been leaning back watching the interplay between the family, finally spoke up. "I'm with Travis. Our guests need to be protected from themselves. That must always be something a family member handles, and a priority." Oh dear. His Aunt Rose was frowning, and she had that look on her face that implied you were suggesting they hire monsters. This was not someone you wanted to piss off, and it appeared that Travis had just made her furious. "The Burnett Ranch was established in 1870, right after the Civil War. My grandfather opened the Dude Ranch back in 1946 and saved our heritage with the money he made showing city slickers our life in the country. I'm never going to be for closing a piece of our heritage," his Aunt Rose said, glaring at him like he was robbing the family silver. The old woman had more money than any of them and no heirs. "You're so right," his cousin Desiree said, and Travis wanted to barf. The woman worked in the front office and didn't know a thing about ranch life, though her father had been a great cowboy until an accident sidelined him. Now he sat on the board, but hardly ever said anything. He just let the younger generation make the decisions with Aunt Rose leading them. "Any other discussion on closing the Dude Ranch?" Everyone was silent. "Let's vote," his aunt said. There was no chance in hell this was going to pass, but he had to try for his own sanity. "There are only 3 votes,"
The Dude Ranch will continue, his aunt said. Next piece of business is the hiring of the new chef. She graduated from Escoffier in Boulder, Colorado, and is top-rated.
Tanner raised his brows. So why is she willing to come to a ranch on the outskirts of Texas? What have we got to offer? Why not some fancy schmancy restaurant in New York? His aunt smiled.
Let's just say that she's had some bad things happen in her life, and she needs a break from the highfalutin culinary world, but wants to continue doing what she loves.
Well, then she's not going to stay here long, Tanner said. Travis remembered when she had flown down and toured their kitchen and cooked them a meal. The food had been excellent. Kind of frou-frou, but that's what people were expecting. Stop making assumptions, Tanner, Cousin Cameron said. We don't know that. She may learn she loves Texas. No snow, warm winters, and hot as hell summers, Justin said. Travis glanced at his brother and grinned. He'd just gotten his hand slapped by the next-to-youngest Burnett cousin, Cameron, and a smackdown from Justin. Desiree was the youngest, but that girl had a head on her shoulders. I make a motion that we hire her, Cousin Desiree said. Have we tasted her cooking? Tucker asked. Yeah, we had her out here a few weeks ago. You were in L.A., Cody said. That was the problem with Tucker. He had his own business to run, and oftentimes he wasn't here when important decisions were made, though he did his best to attend every board meeting. Where was I? Tanner asked. Travis leaned over. You were getting a checkup at the VA hospital in Dallas, he said. Tanner frowned, and Travis knew he didn't like it when they talked about his PTSD, but the man had come so far from when he came home from the war. All in favor, raise your hands, his aunt said. It was unanimous. She's hired. I'll have Katie send her the package offer. If all goes well, she'll soon be here. They all glanced around at each other, knowing the board meeting was almost over and ready to get out of here. The small room was stuffy, and he could hear the office staff right outside the doors keeping things running. I need someone to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. His cousin Jacob spoke up, and immediately they all voted on ending their once-a-month board meeting. Once it was over, Travis slowly rose, knowing what he had to go do. It was past time, and he wanted to get out there before they closed the gates. Gotta go, he told his family and grabbed his hat on the way out the door. Shoving it on his head, he walked out to his truck parked not far from the office building. Climbing in, he started up the vehicle and pulled out of the drive. As much as he hated cemeteries, he seemed to always find a sense of desolate peace when visiting. It took him about 20 minutes to drive to the Riverdale Cemetery. When he pulled through the gate, the memory of the day of the funeral slapped him in the face. Of standing between his brothers, staring in horror as they lowered her casket into the ground. The feeling of numbness that this couldn't be happening had overwhelmed him. In an instant, his life had changed forever. Putting the truck in park and turning off the ignition, he reached for the flowers he'd bought and grabbed them off the seat. As he climbed out of the truck, he glanced around at the barren place and the sense of sadness that seemed to permeate the air. Walking up to the grave, he stared down at the tombstone. Amanda Burnett and child, taken much too soon. With a sigh, he leaned down and took out the old flowers in the vase and put the new ones in. Every time he came here, his heart would ache with loneliness. Sorrow would fill his eyes with tears. God, how I still miss you. Our baby would be almost 2 years old. You two were my life, and now I have nothing. The wind blew, and he heard the tinkling of wind chimes. It almost sounded like she answered him. I doubt you know I'm here, but still I have to come check on you, even if I'm just staring at a piece of rock with your name on it. Slowly, he rose. Today, I tried to convince the family to close the Dude Ranch, but they weren't interested. I couldn't help but think about how much you loved the talent show. Without your touch, it's just never the same. God, how do I go on living without you? For almost 3 years, he'd asked himself that same question over and over. He sighed and glanced around at all the tombstones. His heart ached with the sadness of this lonely land. Glancing over, he saw other family members, but he never thought to bring flowers to them. Only Amanda and their baby. Swallowing hard, he knew he had to leave. He couldn't stay long. It hurt too much. Gotta go, darling. See you next time. Turning, he hurried to the truck, jumped in, and started the vehicle. Damn, it just wasn't fair. They had loved each other since they were 16, and their life together had ended way too early.